Hi guys, it's Jessica on Fiction and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a series recap video for a very popular young adult series, Serpent Dove by Shelby Mahurin. The new book, God and Monsters, is about to be released, so stick around to hear what went down in the first two books. Alright guys, before we get into the recap, I just want to say that I have very mixed feelings on this series. I loved Serpent and Dove so much. However, I despised Blood and Honey, and that didn't change on my reread. So I'm going to try to keep my bias out of this. Also, this is going to be filled with spoilers, so if you have not read the first two books, do not watch this video. This is really just to refresh the minds of people that read the books and don't want to do a full reread before God and Monsters comes out. Also, I might forget some stuff. I'm doing this completely off the cuff like my other series recaps, so let me know in the comments down below if I do. If you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos on Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram. It is linked down in the description below. With that being said, let's get into this recap. Alright guys, so starting with the first book, Serpent and Dove. So this is a dual perspective story, and it's following Lou and Reed. Lou, or Louise, is a Dame Blanche witch, which means she pretty much uses the law of equivalent exchange in order to use her magic. So she's able to see these threads in her mind, and they connect things of equal power, if that kind of makes sense. So I think in the beginning of the book, she's trying to open a lock, and she ends up breaking her finger, and I think it breaks the lock. That might be completely wrong. Another one is she has a memory. She's trying to warm a character, and she thinks of a memory of her being very happy and a warm heart, and then she loses that memory, but in doing so she's able to use heat. So I probably explained that terribly, guys, I'm sorry, but equivalent exchange is all you really need to know, and she's able to see threads in her mind. So she has left her chateau where her coven is in the beginning of this series, and we're not really sure why. She's living as a thief, and she's best friends with Cosette, or Coco, who is a blood witch, which I just think is really, really cool. We find out more about this in the next book. Probably one of the only reasons I like the next book. But her blood is pretty much magic. And she's also seeing a guy named Boz, who's also a thief, and that's pretty much where her story starts. Then we have Reed Diggory. He was an orphan and is now a chasseur. I'm sorry guys, I'm butchering this. And he is a witch hunter. So he's been, his entire life, he's been growing up to kill witches. He is very close to the Archbishop, who also is very gung-ho with killing witches. And that's pretty much all we have going on with him. His best friend is Jean-Luc, who is also very jealous of Reed because Reed is the captain of the chasseurs, and he's just super jealous. Reed is also seeing a woman named Celine, who has recently broken up with him because her sister was killed by a witch, and she doesn't want to be a distraction to Reed. So she was like, you can't marry me, go off, you need to find these witches, hunt them down, and kill them. So that is where both of those stories start off. So, moving forward, Lou has decided to steal a ring. A woman named LaBelle, who owns, I think it's supposed to be some sort of women's prostitution thing going on. She tells Lou that there is a ring that can help hide her. And once again, we know that Lou is running from something. We're not exactly sure what yet. So Lou goes to steal this ring. And the ring happens to be in the house of Reed's ex-girlfriend. So Reed finds out someone's broken into her house and goes to stop them. So Lou and Reed end up running into each other, and Lou is able to escape. Reed thinks she's a thief and was like, I can't believe I let this girl get away, and he suspects that there is a witch. I forgot to say, witches, when they use magic, there's a smell in the air. So it's very easy to detect a witch if she's using magic based on the smell. I think they say it smells like incense at some point. Also, Reed has a Belisarda, which is a sword that's able to counter magic. So all the chasseurs carry these, and that makes them immune to magic, which is very dangerous for the witches. So anyway, Lou is able to escape with the ring, and she is hunted down by Reed. So he's in the city looking for her, and she ends up staying at an opera house and just spending the night in the attic. Unfortunately for her, Reed and the Archbishop are both attending that opera the next day, and Reed sees Lou when she's heading downstairs to use the bathroom and just attacks her. and starts chasing her. Unfortunately, he chases her through the curtain, the show curtain, and everyone sees Lou or Reed jump on this girl. So the Archbishop confronts them and says, look, Reed, I'm gonna have to kick you off the chasseurs because it looks like you just attacked this girl and assaulted this girl in front of everybody. They're asking for blood. And then Lou, I'm gonna send you to jail because you're a thief and the only way you can avoid doing this is if you marry Reed. So it's very comical, but Reed and Lou end up getting married. So Lou is trying to prevent Reed from realizing that she's a witch, and these guys hate each other. Lou is just very obnoxious, very grandiose, loves to curse, and Reed is just a good boy that like really plays by the rules. So they end up going to the Chasseur Tower and living there. There we meet Ansel. So Ansel is a chasseur in training, and he's younger. I think he's like 16, and he ends up being the guard of Lou, which is also very comical because she outsmarts him a couple times. And Lou ends up being interrogated by Jean-Luc, the Archbishop, and Reed, and she gives up Coco's name because they're looking for a witch, not realizing it's her. So she gives up Coco's name, thinking that Coco is long gone. Unfortunately, also, or not unfortunately, but comically, we realize that Coco is actually living also in Chasseur Tower, pretending that she is a nurse, and lucky for her, where she is a nurse, there is this magic smell already that the people are used to, so Lou and Coco can just practice magic. So it's pretty much going from there. Reed and Lou are like starting to get along a little bit. They both have a love of romance novels, which is very interesting, until unfortunately, Boss ends up being captured. So if you remember, Boss was someone who Lou was dating in the very beginning of the story, and he knows that Lou's a witch, Coco's a witch, and all of this. So Louise freaks out, and she was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna tell in order to save his own life. She's not really sure if he'll do that, but she's worried. So Lou ends up sneaking out and erasing Boss's memories and letting him go. Now, Jean-Luc really thinks and starts to suspect Lou is a witch. However, Reed is just mad at her and ends up like not letting her out of his sight. But anyway, Boss gets away. This is kind of important in the next book, but not really. Anyway, just remember that Boss had all of his memories taken away. So he doesn't remember Lou, he doesn't remember Coco. So Lou and Reed starting to fall in love, starting to like each other, and Reed asks Lou to go to a show with him over like the romance book they like. And they're holding hands and everything's going really well, until Lou realizes that one of the performers in the show is a woman that was in her coven when she was younger. So she's very afraid that this witch is gonna realize that it's her and freaks out, tries to run, but the witch ends up seeing her and is like, confronts her. So Lou, for some reason, really doesn't want this witch like knowing who she is, ends up telling Reed that this girl's a witch. I think her name's Estelle. That Estelle's a witch, and Reed attacks her. And she ends up being burned at the stake, and Lou is just so overcome with grief over this because it's her fault that this woman is burning. So she ends up taking the pain away from the girl as she's burning on the stake, and like I said, it's equivalent exchange. So by taking the girl's pain away, she ends up having it. So Ansel is with her during this, and Ansel smells the magic, and Lou falls to the ground screaming. She's in a lot of pain, and Ansel ends up keeping her secret, which is so sweet because, like I said, he's trying to be a witch hunter, so I love Ansel. But anyway, she ends up recovering, and Reed and Lou fall more and more in love. A couple other things happen, not super important to the plot. We end up meeting a guy named Beau, who is the king's son, who's like super full of himself, and we end up seeing, I think I said her name wrong before, Celie is actually Reed's ex-girlfriend. I think I said Celine. We end up seeing Celie and Reed have this like confrontation where Reed says that he might be falling in love with his wife, who is Lou, which is very sweet. So everything is going well until there is a show for the Archbishop. So during this show, we find out that Morgan is the leader of the Dame Blanche witches. Also, we find out that Morgan slept with the Archbishop and had a child, which is so scandalous. The entire city is like in an uproar about this during this show. Then we realize that the person who's actually like doing this show is Morgan herself, and she's come to like claim something. She's come to attack. Then we realize that Lou is the daughter of the Archbishop and Morgan. We also realize that the Archbishop wanted Reed to marry Lou in order kind of to save Lou, And he did it kind of for like a selfish reason. But also the guy's a total hypocrite because the entire time he's been killing witches, he actually had a child with one of them. So, goes from there. So Reed ends up finding out that Lou is a witch because she uses magic to protect him when the witches attack. And Reed then says, "You're not my wife. I don't love you," and like is super mean to her. So she runs away, and when she runs away, Morgan steals her and takes her. So we also find out that Morgan plans to sacrifice Lou in order to kill off all of the king's children. Now, she attempted to sacrifice Lou when she was 16 years old. However, Lou was able to use magic to give up her life at the Coven in order to save her actual life and ran away. So Lou's very upset about this. She's just hurt about her mother wanting to sacrifice her. Obviously, she's very hurt that her husband no longer loves her, and she just feels betrayed and very depressed. However, we then find out that LaBelle, who I mentioned earlier, the woman that owned the brothel, the whole prostitution thing, is actually Reed's mother. So LaBelle had a relationship with the king, had Reed. Morgan and LaBelle were very good friends, and LaBelle was upset with Morgan that she was trying to kill all of the king's children because her child was one of the king's children. So Morgan ends up leaving little baby Reed in a trash can, and LaBelle leaves the Coven in order to find him, doesn't find him until we're towards the end of this book when she realizes that the captain of the chasse is actually her son. So LaBelle ends up teaming up with Reed after Reed realizes that he's been a complete douche and needs to go find his wife and that he actually loves Lou even though she's a witch. So Reed, Coco, Beau, who I mentioned earlier was the prince, the king's son, and Ansel and LaBelle all head over to find out where Lou is. It turns out LaBelle knows exactly where the Coven is because she was part of this Coven, and they go to find Lou and save her before she can be sacrificed. Now, Lou is just dealing with the fact that all of this is going on, and she finds out from Morgan, her mother, that Reed is actually the son of the king, so that way when Lou is sacrificed, Reed's gonna die as well. So now Lou really doesn't want to get sacrificed even more than she did before and is freaking out. So back with the allies, LaBelle ends up changing all of their faces so they're unrecognizable using magic, and she says to wait for a signal until they attack. So they join in this like witch party, all celebrating Lou about to be sacrificed, and then Morgan appears with Lou floating next to her, and the Archbishop has been captured. So Morgan says she's about to sacrifice Lou, and she also says that she found this traitor, and it ends up being LaBelle, and I think Morgan ends up stabbing LaBelle at this point. And then Reed freaks out, tries to save Lou. At one point, Beau gets on a table and starts singing a raunchy bar song called Big Titty Liddy as a distraction, which for some reason works. It's a very weird part of the book. But anyway, Morgan ends up slitting Lou's throat. So we think that it's too late. Like, all of the king's children are going to die and everything is lost. However, Reed ends up having this horrible moment where he's just like despairing and just so upset. I think he says he like falls into blackness, but in that blackness he sees a thread linking Lou and the Archbishop. Then we realize that Reed might actually be a witch because he is the son of LaBelle, who is a witch, and although we have never heard of male witches, maybe they exist. So Reed somehow knows exactly what he's supposed to do and ends up stabbing the Archbishop because a life for a life, and in doing that he's able to save Lou. Because he loved Lou so much, he also loved the Archbishop, ends up being equivalent exchange. So Lou's neck starts healing, Morgan is really pissed, I think Coco ends up stabbing Morgan. Whatever happens, they're able to escape. So Morgan is now very angry. I think they end up escaping to the forest. Cosette is able to heal LaBelle with blood and honey, and who's Reed's mom, like I said, and Lou ends up just slowly healing. So that is where this book ends. It ends with them all hiding in the forest after this horrible time. They're all hiding from the chasseurs and the witches. Both want them dead, and Reed and Lou end up realizing that they love each other. They kiss, and Reed ends up talking to his mom and discussing dealing with abandonment issues and all that stuff. So that is where the first book ends. I'm sorry if this wasn't the most, it was a very chaotic review. I will try to do a better job with the second book. All right, so moving into Blood and Honey, this starts exactly where Serpent and Dove left off with all of the main characters. Reed, Lou, Ansel, Coco, Beau, and LaBelle all hiding from the witches and the chasseurs in this dark wood. So through some circumstances, we find out that Morgan is planning on attacking during the Archbishop's funeral. So the group decides that they have to gather allies, and that's the best way to go against Morgan. So we find out that Coco is actually the princess of the Blood Witches, so she asks her aunt for safe sanctuary and also to see if she'll join in the fight. We also learned that there are werewolves and other paranormal creatures that we didn't actually know existed until now. So what ends up happening is Coco's aunt doesn't want a chasseur going to her coven for obvious reasons. So Lou and Coco and Ansel decide to go to the Blood Witches to see if they'll join their cause, while Reed and the rest of them all go to the werewolves. Also, during this time, we are introduced to the character of Claude Devereaux, who is this interesting character who pretty much runs a, like, not a circus, but this kind of like a circus. Like, he has a bunch of famous performers that, like, travel to different areas. So he decides to take Reed and all of them to the werewolves. So they go in separate directions. Now we're starting to realize that Reed and Lou are having some emotional issues. Reed is devastated that he killed his father figure, while Lou is just grappling with the fact that her father was killed and her mother is just a jerk. And they're kind of dealing with that, but not communicating in any way. And then Reed also starts to hate Lou's magic and asks that she not use it. Now Lou is like, I'm not going to change myself. I'm a witch. I've always used my magic. So they're separating on not great terms. So following Lou and Coco go to the Blood Witches, where they meet Nicolina, who is a wraith and just super creepy. She's this woman that apparently likes to eat hearts and is terrible, and she is like the right-hand man of the leader of the Blood Witches. So Cosette asks her aunt, the leader of the Blood Witches, if she'll help join in the fight against Morgan, and her aunt's like, no, we're not getting involved with this. Yeah, we hate Morgan, but like, this isn't our problem. Then we find out that one of the children in the Blood Witch Coven has gone missing, and it also turns out that this is a child of the king. So Coco's aunt ends up siding or giving Lou a deal, saying that, hey, if you find this kid before midnight, we'll join your fight. So Lou decides to help, and they're searching and searching for the kid, and unfortunately they do end up finding the kid, but he's already been killed, and they realize he's been killed by Morgan. So while this is happening, we also, while looking for this child, Lou is introduced to the child's younger sister named Gabriella, and she's just this very inquisitive, like, cute little girl, and Lou immediately, like, has a bond with her. And she's also related to Reed because she's the child of the king. So at the funeral of her brother, this little boy, Gabriella goes missing, and it turns out it's by Morgan. Again, Morgan's just killing all of the king's children. So the Blood Witch ends up deciding that enough is enough. We're gonna side with you just because, like, we want to stop Morgan from killing all of our people. So Lou does what she needs to do on her side. Now we have Reed. So Reed is with these carnival performers, and he realizes that there are more male witches than just him. He actually meets two of them. He's a knife thrower. He's also trying to deal with his mom because his mom is trying to mother him, even though she pretty much let him go as a baby and hasn't been around his entire life. And he's also dealing with magic and not wanting to use magic, and his mom's trying to push him to do magic, and this is why I'm over this book. It's a lot of just emotions going on. So they're heading to the werewolves, and then Lou ends up showing up, meeting up with them. And unfortunately, we find out that Lou killed the werewolf's son when he was a chasseur, and that is what promoted him to captain, which I'm not really sure why. I'm sorry, Reed killed the werewolf's son, and that's why he was promoted to captain. And I'm not really sure why Reed was never like, hey, maybe I shouldn't go to the werewolves because I murdered their prince, and the leader's probably really upset with me. The leader is named Blaze, by the way. So they meet up with the werewolves, and obviously Blaze is like, you killed my son, I hate you, and immediately tries to attack them. And then Reed ends up making a deal with the werewolf that if his pack goes to hunt him and he's able to survive, that he'll join them, I think, something along those lines. So Reed is being chased by the werewolves while the rest of the grouping is chilling with the werewolves, and it's very uncomfortable. And then the Shahs attack the werewolves, and Lou ends up losing control of her magic and sends an ice storm, and Lou is slowly turning into her mother, essentially, is what is happening. She is just becoming very cold and is keeping all of her emotions bottled up and is just exploding. So Reed manages to make it back to the camp without being attacked by the werewolves. However, everyone is in this ice storm that Lou has created, so he has to pretty much convince Lou to like drop this madness. And in doing so, and when she lost control of her power, Lou accidentally injured another son of the leader of the werewolves. So Reed is able to save that werewolf, thereby a life for a life, and the debt is now paid and everyone's good with each other. So Blaze decides, the leader of the werewolves, that he doesn't want to risk his pack. However, he and his children will go fight Morgan. So we have werewolves, we have Claude Devereaux, the leader of this carnival, and we have the Blood Witches now all ready to fight Morgan. So time passes, a lot of like turmoil happens. Reed and Lou fight at one point, like physically, in order to like teach Ansel. Ansel also during this has a crush on Coco, and Coco kind of hooks up with him and then breaks his heart, and Ansel's just having a really hard time. So day of the funeral comes, and for some reason Morgan does not attack. However, Reed and LaBelle really want to get the king on their side to help against Morgan, which everyone is saying this is a terrible idea. The king is not who you think he is. Even Beau, the king's son, is like, I don't think we should ask my dad for help. But LaBelle is like, I loved him once, he'll help us. And Reed wants to like see his dad. So when going to talk with the king, it turns out that the king, I think his name is August, is a terrible person. He ends up like treating his son terribly and like puts him in prison, captures Reed and captures LaBelle, and has them like chained downstairs. So he's torturing Reed. He says he's gonna like do that torture thing where like you put a mouse in a can and then fire and he like eats through the person. It's very graphic. So he's not gonna help them. However, Beau's two younger sisters, who are the princesses, end up releasing Reed and Beau. Unfortunately, LaBelle is still chained up and isn't freed. So they get back to Lou, they're still wondering what's happening, and then they realize they were wrong the entire time. It wasn't actually the funeral of the Archbishop that Morgan was going to come during the attack, or was going to come to attack. It was a different message. So it turns out that Morgan has actually captured Celie and is imprisoning her somewhere. So Lou decides that she is going to go and save Celie, and is very afraid because of a premonition Coco gave that someone very close to her is going to be killed. So she doesn't tell anyone where she's going. She locks the door, goes to try to save them. Now, obviously, Reed and all of them, and the entire grouping, including all the allies, are like, okay, we got to go after her. We got to go find Celie. We got to find Lou. We got to stop Morgan from killing her. So they all go. A lot of stuff happens. They find Celie. Celie's been enchanted to go to Morgan, where they all go to Morgan. Lou ends up telling Ansel that he is a child and can't help in order to protect him, to get him to go away. He doesn't. He follows them anyway. So they all show up. Everyone's there when Morgan and Lou end up having this big fight. However, the fight is cut short because Claude Devereaux is actually like a mythical creature that is like the father of all Earth and transforms into this crazy being. And it turned out that he used to date Morgan, and he's very ashamed of the way she is, and he's saying that his sister is not happy with her. I'm thinking the sister is like the queen of like the witches or something. And Morgan is like very upset that she can't kill Lou now because there's this mythical thing stopping her. So unfortunately, before she leaves, she kills Ansel. And that is the person that the premonition was talking about that was going to be killed, that was close to Lou. So everyone is very upset, obviously. And Lou and Coco like lose their shit, and they're about to try to kill Morgan, but they end up being taken away by Reed. And that's pretty much where that whole plot line ends. So now Lou is super angry and is just wants to do anything to kill Morgan because she killed Ansel. So she meets with the Blood Witches, where we find out that the Blood Witches have actually been working with Morgan the entire time. So at the end of this book, the Blood Witch, the queen, ends up poisoning Lou and I think putting the Wraith, Nicolina's body, into Lou and essentially possessing her. And it ends with Lou, who is possessed by Nicolina, kissing Reed. So that is the second book. I'm sorry. I also felt like that was very chaotic. However, that's the best I can do to like summarize both these books. Like I said, I love Serpent and Dove. Did not enjoy Blood and Honey. I'm really hoping it's suffering from middle book syndrome and Gods and Monsters is just awesome. I'm still very excited for the next book, and I hope this summary helped refresh all of your minds. All right, guys, that is it for my wrap up. Sorry it was all over the place. Please let me know down in the comments below if I missed anything. I am positive I did. I said this already, but I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.